Laptop must be a little bit. Hello everyone, and thank you very much for joining us. I hope you're all safe and well and have enjoyed the bank holiday weekend. Just before I hand over to Ed, who will be running the session, or Ask the Expert session on Facebook, just want to run through a few things. The first one being that we are live, we're not pre-recorded. So if we have any technical challenges or we lose any audio, which I hope we haven't done so far, please just bear with us whilst we sort it out. The other side is that we have left the chat out, so please feel free to say hello. However, as we are looking at a lot of questions, please do use the questions tab to submit questions. There's also a little function on there as well whereby you can vote for a question that you like. So that'll help us sort through some of the questions as well. We do have a polls tab, and your feedback is really important to us. So what we'll do at the end is we'll drop a few questions in there. Please be honest with your feedback. And if you have any suggestions for other sessions that we can look at as we go into the future, then please do just let me know. And lastly, we will have the recording available, so look out for the link and we'll send it to you afterwards. So with all that, I'm going to hand over to Ed.
Morning. Sorry, I'm already caught in by and thank you very much for that introduction, but I'm already looking through at the locations where people are coming in from. We have people literally from Cheshire to South Wales to Somerset to Egypt and Belgium. So when you do say hello, and thank you to everyone who is saying hello, let us know where you're dialing in from as well. I'd love to know where we're communicating to this morning. Me, myself, I'm from the town of St Ives here in Cambridgeshire on a beautiful sunny day outside-ish, but delighted to talk to you today. When I know that there are going to be a lot of questions, and we will of course endeavour to get through all of the questions that we can throughout this session. But I wanted to start just by doing a bit of an introduction to start with. We are going to Edinburgh down to Cornwall, Tamworth in Staffordshire. It's great. New Zealand, crikey, what time is it there? So it's lovely to see you all here this morning, and welcome. I have my drinks on standby in case the voice starts to go. I did a live chat before and didn't have a drink on standby and started coughing, which in the middle of a pandemic is never a good thing to do. But that's why we're doing this virtually. So anyway, today is about the understanding Facebook to help our business. And there are going to be lots of questions. And as we've already said, then put them through the questions tab, please. But I just wanted to just cover off some of the key points, the way I see the things that we should be focusing on initially to get our Facebook up and running. There's so much that we have to do to run a business. And there is so much on social media that it can be quite overwhelming when we go to it first of all, and then quite frustrating when we realize that we're putting images out there, talking about our products, and very little is happening. So this is about kind of stripping the layers off some of those challenges for you. And I'll start doing that in a moment. And then, of course, get into the specific questions. But Greece, India, Lancashire, look at that. There's and Portugal. Wonderful. Basically ticking all the places that I'd love to go to, but naturally can't at the moment. But we'll cross that bridge further on. So my experience comes from considerable background that Social Bee has a team of experts that constantly develop websites to be more profitable and to use social media to enhance those websites and conversations further still. So my expertise is part of that, or my experience, more to the point, is part of that. Looking forward to answering your questions in a moment. But there are 5 things that I want us to kind of just focus on, that of course you can ask more questions about when we get to it, but just 5 things to really start to explore at the end of this call. So first thing, you may have noticed that Mark Zuckerberg recently announced the new Facebook shops. Now, the idea of Facebook shops is that you can sell your products through the Facebook shops feature on your page. On one side, this is brilliant. There is a challenge, though, one of which is not everyone has this functionality yet. Like everything that Facebook does, This is drip fed out, usually from a kind of center in America and then fed out further afield from there. So if you don't have this yet, don't fret. But Facebook Shops is an opportunity for you to sell your products and then go directly to your website to then complete the purchase or go through that purchase within Facebook. And actually, Facebook are waiving the fees until the end of June as well. So there's a great benefit there as and when you get that functionality. Does this mean you don't need a website? No, but what it can do is it can enhance your reach. And when you focus on getting the organic side of Facebook so strong, then it does send more pairs of eyes to the products and services that you sell. There is a golden rule, of course, when it comes to social media. One rule that sits above all the other rules, and that is that nobody joins social media to be sold to. We accept that adverts take place. We accept that there are functionalities like marketplace and shops, and that's great. But no one joins social media so they can be bombarded by sales pitches in the place where you expect to see organic features and conversations. But when we get that bit right and we get the shops right, then we get more eyes into the parts of our business that is actually going to generate more sales for us. So if you do have exposure to Facebook Shops, then go to it, understand how it can work for you. If you don't have it, then you will at some point. And then again, either complete that through your e-commerce site, through your own website, or you can complete the purchase and shipping through Facebook itself. And as I say, it seems that it's gone, that they're waiving fees until the end of June for independent retailers. So an added advantage for us. They may extend that further still. I guess anything is open and up in the air at the moment. We'll see how that goes. But we're going to focus so much on the organic side of Facebook because ultimately that's where the value really lies. And you will have a number of followers, 20, 200, 2,000, 20,000, 2 million, who knows, followers on your page. And they all like to get involved and consume content in different fashions. So it's important for us to try and reach out to our audience as best we can and to vary our content. And there are so many different ways that we can do this. We can, sure, on one hand, create images of the products that we sell. But there is such an advantage for an independent retailer above larger retailers, and that is the people who run those shops, the people behind the scenes. And social media is a human tool. So it is an opportunity for you to showcase and to get people bought into you as an individual, get bought into your brand and understand what it is about you that makes you the place to go to. For example, there is so often, whatever it is I'm buying, even if it's a pencil, I could buy that, anywhere, online or in a bricks and mortar shop. But what you want to do is you want me to come to you to buy from you because you have a level of knowledge, experience, passion for what you do, customer-centric operations, and a way that really gets me to be passionate about your products and services. Prime example is even last week, I bought a washer dryer. I mean, what do you want a washer dryer to break down during the middle of a pandemic? But I had to buy a washer dryer. I bought one from a local retailer, independent retailer from here, because this customer service for them is extraordinary. And I only knew about that because I went through and people talked about it on social media and people showcased their examples of the customer service. So we want to vary our content to be attractive to others. Infographics are great. Videos are fantastic. How-tos. Social media loves how-tos. There is so much that we can do on social media, but most importantly, we need to ask questions. So if your questions or if your content has been 100% about yourself up until now, the challenge for you is to reduce that to a far smaller percentage and make it 20% about you and about 80% about your audience. Ask them questions. Get them to buy into you. We want to build those comments and shares above the likes because that's where the real value lies, and we'll look at that a little bit more with engagement. So step 3 is embrace Facebook stories. You'll see these are at the top of your Facebook, whether you're when you look at your Facebook profile, either you're looking on your static terminal, like the laptop I'm looking at now, or whether you're looking at your phone, you've got Facebook stories. And these are quite imaginative ways of capturing the attention. These are the same stories that you would see on Instagram. The concept is still the same. So, jump out and be a bit adventurous with the stories. There are some fantastic templates that you can use. Places like Canva is a start for that. But explore other people's stories, get imagination from them, and then put your slant on it that can reach out to your audience and get them talking about you too. But the most important part of this is engagement, that we need to build a fan base. Your website is the place where people are going to go to buy the products and to understand more about the products and services you provide. Whereas your social media is a human tool, not a data tool. We've been doing social media since, all our lives, whether it's hieroglyphics on pyramid walls or emojis on WhatsApp. The technology has changed, but we as human beings haven't. So we need to make sure that we're getting people to fall in love with our business and with us. So when you're creating your content on Facebook after this chat, almost ignore the likes. A like is like a high five. No one falls in love with a high five. People fall in love with each other over conversations. And that's what we want to do, get our fans to fall in love with our shop, with our business, with us. And we do that by asking questions about them. We do that by driving conversation from them. And when we do that, people then come to us at the point they want to buy a product or service. There is, of course, that idea that if you're putting a product, let's say you're selling headphones, for example, the chances of me posting a link to buy your headphones from here at the exact moment that someone is looking to buy headphones from my page, well, the chances of that happening are minuscule at best. So what we want to do is engage with those, our audience, get conversing with them, let them know that we have their back by the area that we focus on, so that at the point they're looking to buy headphones, we're the place they go to because they're already in love with us from the many conversations we've had before. But you need to know as well that you're spending your time sensibly, because there is so much that you have to do as it is, and social media can often feel like just another thing to add to a list. When it works fantastically. When we have conversations and people are talking about us from something we've started, it's a beautiful moment. But we want to know that that's happening. We want to know that we're getting more engagement. We want to know that people are talking about certain posts. We want to know which posts work, which posts don't, so that we can repeat the ones that work and ignore the style of post that doesn't work. And we can only do that if we ultimately measure our success. You want to use social media to drive traffic to your website? Well, what's the traffic to your website now? And then in 3 months' time, with stages in between, what does that look like further down the line? Have you achieved that goal? And only when we measure our success through tools like Facebook Insights and even Google Analytics can we truly understand whether that time has been spent wisely. So that was like a 10-minute crash course, if you like, into the things that we need to focus on to start our journey in getting Facebook to work for us. And I'm hoping that there are questions to be asked by you as well, which we're going to do in stages. So we're going to start, and don't worry if you're not sure where it is, but we're going to start with strategy first of all, move through engagement, measurement, and other. But I'll hand over to Susie for the Q&A part of today.
Okay, so we have had a few questions come through, and I think some of them are around the tips that you've just kind of flew through. A few quick ones. You mentioned Facebook Shops and its limited rollout. A question I think from Sarah was, how would they know if they have Facebook Shops available? Where would they go to see if they have that functionality?
So when you look at your Facebook feature on your list of options on the left-hand side on your page, you've got About, Posts, Photos, Videos. Shops will be there as well if you've got that functionality.
Okay, great. There was another question from Sakov. So they say, I have a personal Facebook page and manage my business page from there. Is it better to have a separate dedicated Facebook business page, or are you okay managing it from your personal?
So when you log into Facebook, you will have a login, which is your personal login. But absolutely, when you're running a business, have a separate business page for it. And there's a few reasons for this. So one reason is that when I like your page, then I can't see who else likes your page. I can't see who runs the page. I feel safer liking and engaging with a page from a security perspective. Whereas if you're running your business from a personal profile, then I have to add you as a friend. And the minute I do that, I open up all my Facebook profile information to you, photos of my family, where I go on holiday, my political rants, if you like. But these are the things that suddenly are available for you to see. But I don't want that. I just want to connect with you because you're a business. So for me as a consumer, I'm going to be less likely to connect with you. You're going to find it harder to get people to like you, to be involved with you as a result, by only running it through a personal profile. There's a second reason for this too, and the second reason is your own analytics. Firstly, you won't have the shop functionality. You won't have a lot of the functionalities that run through this. But when you have a business page, you will have the measurement details. If I go back and just show an example here, when you look at this is an overview slide that you're looking at, and all the areas on the left-hand side are all the things that you can see more in-depth information about, posts that are successful, the demographics of the people that interact with your page, how many people have clicked on links or got involved in links. None of that is available to you if you run through your page from a personal profile. So absolutely run a business page as a business page, and you go to facebook.com/pages for that. That's where you set up a page from, and don't run it from a personal profile, because you will struggle to get anywhere near the level of success you could achieve if you run it through a page.
That's really good, actually. We have had a few sessions in the past where people have asked the difference between a personal account and having a business account, and the advice has always been have a business account. So thank you for going through why. There is a question related to that, actually, that has just popped up from Mena, and she mentioned she has a question about a business manager account and an admin account. Is there a difference between the functionality of those two things?
Yeah, ultimately, when you run a business manager account, I mean, there are different levels. You can assign people different roles within a Facebook page, and you limit the amount of functionality they have on that Facebook page. So an administrator, for example, couldn't go ahead and start taking out adverts or boosting posts on a Facebook page, whereas a business owner can. So the business manager would allow you to carry out advertising through Facebook, and is also where Instagram adverts are housed, but admin rights won't give you that functionality. So that's one of the key differences between the two.
Yeah, and just before we move off the personal page and business page, we'll answer Zelda's question, hopefully, which is, do you need to have a personal page to start a business page? I mean, my instinct is that you can just start a business page, but what would you say?
I mean, you do, because you need to ultimately, if you only have the business page, you only have one login to it, and ultimately you would sometimes get more people running a page. You would you would allow more than one person to have access to running that page. It is better, even if you don't like Facebook personal profiles, and there is much about Facebook personal sites I'm not a fan of, although it's usually the people, not the tool. But have a Facebook personal profile. Keep it dormant. You don't have to post on it. You don't have to add anything to it. Make it sparse as you like, and then create a business page from that. That's where you'll get most of your success. And then you just have the one login. It could allow you to run multiple pages from that as well. It could allow you to run groups from pages that you can then interact personally to. It gives you more functionality that you might decide to adopt in the future, let alone now. So if you're thinking, I don't like Facebook, but I know I need a Facebook page, then create a personal profile. Keep it as empty as you like, and then create a page from that. It'll still only need the one login as well, so you're not going to create more work as a result.
Okay, great. And I'm just going to answer the questions about shops just while we're in this side, because I think that way it helps us. We've got a lot of questions around engagement and measurement, and we'll come to those in a second. There was a question here, just let me re-find it. Sorry, Ed, I did have it and then it all just moved. Okay, it was a question around There we go. The joys of live when you lose your
No,
question.
that's all right. I've got my coffee.
You've got your coffee. Everybody else is waiting for us to restart. Right, I'm going to find that one in a minute. Okay, so we have another question. We've got a lot of questions coming through on engagement. So what we'll do is probably swap to that, if that's okay, because I think there's a lot. Or is it measurement next, Ed?
Well, no, it is engagement. What I will say about the shops
Oh,
is that there is the initial statement that Mark Zuckerberg made, and there will be more information that obviously comes through as it becomes more and more available to independent businesses in the UK. We will, if you go to the Social Bee website, there we have our podcast and blogs on there that will be updated with news as and when it happens. So have a look at that at socialbee.co.uk at some point further down the line, and then you'll as and when we've got information, or keep looking at the site when you have information. When we have information, we'll let you know what it is.
yeah, I found the question. So, right, sorry, just found it.
Dual purpose then.
Okay, great. It was a question about shops. So somebody said, I have a shop on Facebook and have had for quite some time, and they haven't had a single sale from that source so far. Do you have any very general advice on how to start that sales process?
So there is, I mean, the thing about a shop is that it's an attachment to the page. So often that lack of the sales process can come through potential engagement with a page. So it's not unusual to see low sales in a shop, and aside from that, also low engagement on a Facebook page. Now, by engagement, I am, once again, just to reiterate, focusing on the comments and the shares more than I am the likes. So if you find that that's the case, then start building up that organic engagement so that you get more people. The thing about a Facebook page, this is and this is across social networks, is that when you post, when you go to your news feed and you only see the posts from a small number of people that you're actually Facebook friends, right? You only see a small percentage of those appear in your news feed. Well, the same rule applies with pages. The reason is that Facebook wants you to go back more regularly and therefore it shows you posts of people you engage with the most, and that keeps you going back. When we create content on our page, it's important for us, and this will segue into engagement in a moment as well, but when we create content, then when we get people to comment and share on that, then actually our page is more likely to be seen in their news feeds as a result of that engagement. And the more people who engage, the more news feeds it appears in. It's not unusual for you to put a post on Facebook and it actually only appear in about 10% of the news feeds, or in the news feeds of 10% of your audience, even less if you're not getting the level of engagement. So build that side up, and that can have a knock-on effect with shops. If that isn't the case, if you find, well, actually we're getting good level of engagement but low level of sales, then it could be around the descriptions or images in the shops themselves. Obviously, I can't comment on this specific instance, but it does remind me of David Ogilvy, who is one of the great marketers of our generation or previous generations, and he always write quotes down because I never remember them verbatim, but he said, my philosophy of advertising is rather simple. I believe in giving the consumer the facts about the product and making those facts fascinating. And often it's that last bit that sometimes just eludes us when we're talking about it. Try and look at the products and services from the outside in, as opposed to just the inside out. And maybe that change of description, change of imagery could in itself garner more sales too. So those two things could help. I will just say one thing on the strategy as well before we move on to engagement. Often just keeping a spreadsheet yourself and planning content is going to be such a friend to you. Social media allows us to be flexibility. And in a world that's moving faster than it's ever moved before, it's often difficult to plan. And it's easy for me to say plan 6 months in advance. I'm pretty sure that anyone who planned 6 months ago wouldn't have predicted where we are now. So try and plan the things you want to talk about. Your product lines, what's coming out, what trends are moving, your own passion and expertise for the products you sell. So, and you also know things like the seasons that we're in. So try and the environment that we all now find ourselves in. There's even a phrase for Zoom chic. I'm not sure I'm selling it. I'm working it here, but I'm trying on that. But my point being is that try and plan as much as you can, but allow flexibility to come in. And when you do plan and keep a simple spreadsheet of that basis of a strategy will be a good friend to you when you start to then build the engagement on top of that, which beautifully segues into this, I hope.
Yeah, we've got a lot of questions on engagement, and there's been a few questions on strategy come through. Just to let you know, we'll circle back to those just so that we can get through the other two segments, and any questions that don't fit neatly into engagement or into measurement we'll also circle back to as well. So I've made a bit of a note. Okay, so I think the big question here is the difference between likes and engagement and which one is more important. I think there was a question from there's been a few questions in various guises, but what would you say is more important?
So there's there's two sides. What would I say, and ultimately what Facebook and social networks do. If you can imagine, if Facebook was if engagement was prioritized, and the things you're looking at is shares, when it's like word of mouth. When you're wearing an outfit and someone asks you about that, and you tell them where you got it from and where to go to buy it, or you're sharing that link in a WhatsApp post or a social media post, the shares are is what we're aiming for. We want people to spread the word, and not because we're telling them to, but because the content that we're creating for them is inspiring or empowering or informative, entertaining, if that's even the flavor of your brand. So shares are up here. Likes, you can't see it, but they're down. They're down there. That's where likes are. They're okay. They're a high five. High fives are all right. They're a nice thing to have, but they're very low in terms of engagement. And actually, when you look at the emoticons on Facebook and you move your mouse over the thumb up, then actually you see the other emoticons you can choose: the heart, the caring, the anger, the laughter. They're even more valuable than just the thumb, because it requires even a momentary of more thought to choose one of the emoticons in those. So shares and comments, that's what we're aiming for. And I use, and I'll very briefly describe an analogy that I always do. Imagine you're in a room, your target audience are in that room, everyone is there, packed full, you're on stage talking about your products, and everyone's looking at you and they're nodding in agreement with you. And then you go into room 2, packed full of your audience who couldn't get into room 1, and you're talking about your products and services, and the people in there are not just nodding, but they're talking with each other. They're asking you questions, they're agreeing with you, disagreeing with you, discussing with each other based on the topics that you've created. Now, which room would be more valuable to you? And obviously you're not able to answer quite directly, but I'm going to make the assumption or presumption that it's room 2. And room 2 represents comments and shares, and room 1's just the nods, but nothing else, is just the likes. So comments and shares are absolutely more valuable.
Okay, great. And there's a question here as well around 2 seconds. My connection's dropped and the questions disappeared, so I'm going to go to my I've been pasting them. What would you recommend? So how do you build a fan base from zero? And this is a question I think from Sarah, since it's not like Instagram with followers, others, comments and hashtags, how do you build those new followers?
That's a really good question. Firstly, I must stress there is no special sauce to this. Whatever you adopt isn't going to change in the space of a day or two. It requires patience first and foremost. So when you create content, or when you create a page, you can create the most amazing content there is, but if no one knows you're there, then it's almost irrelevant. So there are some simple things that we can just start that snowball effect. One of which is, of course, invite your friends to it and encourage them to do the same. Secondly, make sure that wherever you are seen, that people know you have a Facebook page. So you can, if you're a very local business, and if the group allows, specifically if the group allows, then you can make an announcement that you now have a Facebook page. You can make sure that it's on all your emails. You can make sure that it's on the side of your vehicles, if that's what you have as well. Anywhere who knows about you has a Facebook page. And what you'll start to do then is you'll start to get people to follow. And then you need to make sure that when they see your page, they start to see conversations take place already. So the emphasis needs to go on building a conversation with those people, which might seem small and insignificant to start with, but they're your key. They're your key to a greater audience further down the line. And that snowball effect will then start to take place as well. And then it's about actually creating the right engagement and creating the type of content that resonates with them, that makes them come to you. Think about it yourself, and this is a challenge for absolutely everyone who's dialed in. Why do you follow someone, not necessarily an individual who might be a friend or a family member, but why do you follow a company or a brand or a retailer or a band or an artist or whoever on social media? What do you get out of that relationship? So when we're creating a Facebook page, we know that we want to sell more products, but we need to look at it from the outside in as well. So why do you follow anyone on Facebook, or any company on Facebook, any business or brand on Facebook? And I suspect you do it because you want to be kept informed. You do it because you enjoy the post they put on there. You do it because they make you smile, they make you feel good, to learn about them, because you like the brand, because you're a big fan of what they do. When you see that from the outside in, that should inspire you to go, well, if that's why I'm following them, then I need to create that kind of engagement too, and then build it up from there. But that first bit is particularly the slowest part. So you do need to have patience, but just focus on that engagement rolling, and don't get worried about follower numbers. Focus on the engagement figures, which are more valuable than follower numbers. Simply, and before I end this question, is if you have 100 people following your Facebook page and they're all engaging with you, they're all commenting on stuff, sharing stuff, they're all part of what it is you're doing, is that more valuable or less valuable than 1,000 people who like your page who do nothing? I know I would prefer the 100 who are more vocal than the 1,000 who do nothing. So focus on those engagement numbers more.
Okay, great. Next question. There's a question here around, it's an interesting question actually, and
well, they've all been so far.
I know. I have a business page, but I prefer Instagram. So I tend to post on Instagram and just share the same content to Facebook in terms of posts and stories. It seems to be generating content for both. And running a shop seems to be a huge task because it saves time. Is that okay? Or should I be using different content for Facebook and Instagram?
Good content is good content. So is it okay? Yes. If you're getting engagement on both, that's great. Just be wary of a couple of things: that you are going on Facebook and interacting separately, that you're not just sharing the post, but you're not getting involved. That you need to understand then that some people might think, well, I follow you on Instagram, there's no need to follow you on Facebook because you're the same. So if you do want to build an audience, a separate audience on both, then just allow for some differentiation. I mean, but it is okay to share it. The other thing to be wary of is hashtags. You can have up to 30 hashtags on Instagram, and in itself doesn't mean you should. But given that hashtags are largely meaningless on Facebook, they also affect the aesthetics of a post. So a key sentence that you're trying to get across on a post on Facebook can be derailed by having a whole bunch of meaningless hashtags below it, because hashtags don't work on Facebook in any of the same way they do on others. So just bear the hashtag elements aside. But ultimately, good content is good content. So yeah, if you're sharing it and you're monitoring how impactful that's being on Facebook, then keep going.
It's great. And whilst we've mentioned Facebook stories, so there's a question from Saskia. Do you have any stats or advice on Facebook stories? I've never used them, but do they have much more engagement as they do on Instagram, or is the feed more engaging on Facebook?
So it depends. I mean, it's entirely down to the quality of the stories and the page itself. So from all the businesses that I've looked at and worked with, there seems to be a general feeling that the Instagram stories are more effective than the grid, whereas, are more effective than the Facebook stories. And I suspect there's a wider, and if I ask my colleagues, that might be the case, although there's bound to be exceptions to every rule. But let your audience decide, because there isn't a one rule for all in this. And some Facebook stories do jump out, some don't, but don't dominate them. Your priority should be your Facebook page. That should be, because even when you create a story, you're really only doing that to divert and use it as a signpost to the page itself. So your priority should be there. But try the stories out and let your audience tell you whether that's working for you or not. Look at the data, create an Instagram story, share it as a Facebook story, keep a consistent measurement of both over a time frame, and let your audience tell you which is producing the greater level of engagement, because they're going to be your best benchmark.
Okay, fantastic. We've had a few questions around ads and boosting posts. So I've got a question here from Sarah, which is, how do you target a specific audience on Facebook, and would you recommend boosts for advertising or use Google?
Well, so yes, I would recommend advertising. I'm not sure I would I would recommend it more than Google, nor am I saying I'd recommend Google more. It's entirely down to what the advert is aimed to achieve. Let's deal with these two things separately. Boosting posts and an advert are not exactly the same thing. Your first question was, can you advertise to a selective audience? Now, whether you're boosting a post or creating an advert, yes. So you could target people based on their geographical location, their age, their gender, their relationship status. I don't know if people still put that on Facebook, but you could. The things they're interested in, the people who follow certain types of other pages. You can be quite, I mean, you can't say I'm targeting this individual person. That doesn't allow it, but you can target a demographic that's quite specific. Remember that, you know, Facebook paints a picture of us based on the content that we put on there, and it allows advertisers then to make sure that we're seeing relevant ads as individuals, but then it can show its adverts to us that we, assuming we fit into that demographic. So whether you're boosting a post or advertising, you can choose a quite defined audience of who you're advertising to. But boosting a post and adverts are largely separate. Boosting a post is taking a piece of content in your page and then taking that existing content and sharing it to an audience who don't like your page. Not because they dislike it, but because they haven't found out that it exists, perhaps. So, and I'm going to come back to that in a moment, but that's what a boosting post does. Whereas an advert is in itself a standalone advert that you would see often on social media that is promoting a product or service or event, or even just your page or somewhere external. So in terms of should that be on Facebook or Google, well, ultimately, that's not a clear answer for anyone to make, although my phone has just,
I don't understand.
my Google Assistant has just jumped in and I think was about to defend Google on that one. That's down to where your audience is and what it is you're offering, and ultimately then when you go through the process of advertising, how much that would cost per click as a result. Also, just one more thing on boosting posts. A lot of people see boosting posts as a solution to an inactive post, and by inactive I mean a post with low engagement. Never. If you take a post that you've created in a Facebook page and it's got no engagement, boosting it isn't going to make it any better. All it's going to do is create no engagement to people who didn't know you existed before. The idea of boosting a post is seeing something that you've put in your Facebook page that has garnered a buzz about it. Whatever that buzz may be, people submitted comments, sharing it. That's the post you want to boost to a world that didn't know it exists. Because if the people who like your page think that's amazing, then too right, you want to spread it as far and wide as you can within your audience frame. So that's the where the boosting post comes into it, but they are separate. But the first part of the answer is yes, you can have quite a defined audience to share it to.
Okay, great. And just whilst we're talking about ads, because again, I think there's been quite a few different questions on it. There's an interesting question from Jamal, which is around paid ads. Is there a calculation to figure out how much you need to spend?
No, because ultimately it's entirely down to competition. If I was selling glass, then I imagine the competition with this will be a lot lower than if I was selling a mobile phone. So therefore, the cost per click is going to be considerably low as a result. We could be talking, I don't know, 30, 40 pence per click for a glass. I'm, guessing on that. Whereas you could be talking £2 or £3 per click on a phone. So therefore, you need to budget accordingly. You can go through the process of creating an advert and stop it at any time. So often what you can do is firstly, have a look around. Google and Facebook, if you've never advertised before, Facebook often give little kind of vouchers, £50, £75 vouchers to advertise on Facebook as well. So, if you can get hold of a voucher, then that's a good place to start. But ultimately, there is no set. Your budget is defined by you. You determine how much you spend. Ultimately, if no one clicks on your advert, it won't cost you anything. But if people click on your advert, it'll be based on the cost per click that Facebook will have guided you that it's going to cost. And at that point, it tells you how much it's going to cost per click. Then you can work out the maths of, well, if I get 10 clicks per day or 100 clicks per day, this is how much it's going to cost me, and you can set your budgets aside. But you must control your budgets when you're advertising on Facebook, your daily budget and your overall campaign budget. You decide when an advert starts and an advert ends and how much you're prepared to spend. And sometimes even just spending £50 or £100 to test the water, if you want to, isn't a bad starting place to give you some indication there as well. But there isn't a way of saying how much you can control, because no two products are the same, and it's entirely driven by the market, which is also driven by the season. Things are more competitive and expensive to advertise nearer Christmas than they are in towards the end of May.
Okay, great. We have a question here from Elizabeth. Said you mentioned we should focus 80% on the customer and 20% on the company. However, how does that differ if you provide services?
It doesn't. You should still the same. Ultimately, you're still engaging. Your social media is an extension to your website. It isn't, or it's an attachment to your website. It isn't your website. It's not there to replicate what your website is designed to do. And if you're offering a service, the chance again of you providing of promoting a service at the exact point that someone's looking to buy it is remote. You put yourself in a situation. The last time you went to a party or the pub or a networking event, all of which I'd love to go to these days, but that's a different story. But you think of the last time you went to any of those three and think about someone that you met who only ever talked about themselves. Whenever you come across that kind of person, you do your darndest to get away from them as soon as you can. Social media is no different. Remember, it's a human tool, not a data tool. So it doesn't matter if you sell a product or service. You need to start asking. You need to ask questions about your audience. You need to build a fan base. You need to get them to be interested in you, and that so often starts by you showing you're interested in them and their experiences. So ultimately, whether it's a product or a service, then it's down to you to promote it. So yeah, it's that comes from you. And also, don't forget, the other side of this is when you are talking about yourself in that 20%, they'll stand out more, because it's not dominating. It just becomes white noise if all you're doing is listing the products and services you sell. If you're talking about your audience, you're caring about them, you're asking about their experiences and interests and needs, then at the point you go, by the way, I've got this, we've been talking about this lately, and I've got this products and service, it stands out because you're doing it from a more selfless perspective. So the short answer to your question is, it doesn't differ whether that's a product or a service.
It's a great answer. Thanks, Ed. I know I've just had I see in the chat from Christine, she said the feed has stopped. I've just had a few technical issues, so hopefully everybody can see and hear everything. But Ed, I think with the time, it'd be good to move on to a little bit of measurement, and we can always come back to any additional questions we have around it, just so that we manage to try and fit as much as we can into the hour. So measurement. Where to start? So
can I just, while you're looking at the question, can I just address one point that's been made here by Claire, who said that I do ask questions but I don't get much back. Now obviously I can't make any judgments on that, but the reason I just wanted to answer that quickly is because that's not an uncommon thing to have. When I do experience this, often I find that the question themselves have two challenges, one of which is you ask a question, but then you add stuff after the question. We're human beings, we can't hold so much. So if you've got one call to action, if you've got a question, make that the only thing in your Facebook post. Don't ask a question and put a link in the post, because you're only going to get one of those two, or most probably neither. You give more of your audience to hold stuff, they're more likely to drop it all. Secondly, often questions can be loaded questions. So if I, for example, had an accountant who asked the question, how long does it take you to do your tax return? You might find that on the surface that's an engaging question, but I know full well that if I said it takes me about 3 weeks to do my tax return, I'm immediately going to be sold a service by that accountant. Now, fine, I might not, but my fear might be that that's quite likely. My cynicism might drive my lack of response. So therefore, it's best if I don't respond. So try and create conversations and questions that are as objective as they can be, and that it's the only thing you're asking, and you're not kind of adding stuff to that post as well. And of course, I can't say that that's what Claire's been doing, but they're often the reasons that I find from other people. So sorry, I just wanted to address that point that I saw.
No, that's fine. And I think just in terms of the questions, I can see there's quite a few coming through. And thank you to Amy, because Amy's in the chat, who's joined us from Social P as well, answering a few in the
She's a
chat. So we
legend.
seem to have two experts on the line, which is fantastic.
Team game, this.
Okay. Yeah, it is. Thank you so much, Amy. So I think actually now that I'm looking at the measurement questions, I feel they probably fit a lot into the engagement side as well. I think one of the questions that was on here is actually around the demographics of the different social channels. So this is from Mel. I've heard from a few people that they think the age demographic of Facebook tends to be higher than Instagram, and therefore some people provide Insta. Is that correct? Is the audience for Facebook older than the other channels?
Yeah, not as much as people think, because TikTok and Snapchat tend to kind of hold on to that far younger audience more often than not. But there is a difference between the two. If you imagine that Facebook, one of the challenges Facebook had when they started, their main audience was around kind of 15 to 25-year-olds, and now it's shifted up more to 35 to 45-year-olds. Instagram does fit between those two figures, but there is a slight differentiation. And that, of course, is the overall demographics. You also have to take into account that 50% of pensioners in the UK have a Facebook page, but you also have to take into account that across all ages, even now, since the lockdown started, people have been on the internet users have been accessing social media around 50% more than they would have done pre-lockdown. So yes, the demographic is different, but it's your audience, and let your audience decide what that might be. So it could be that your audience is your audience, that the target audience might be 35 to 45, but your audience might be 25 to 35. So let your data tell the story more than the overall overarching figures. Welcome back, by the way.
Sorry. Hopefully that'll sort out our connection problems. The joys of live.
That's great.
It's not. I think anybody who's seen them before, we haven't had quite as many issues. So, okay. Questions. So, interesting question from Jess here, which says the Facebook algorithm seems to block posts if you mention words such as sale or if you put a URL link in. Is there any way around that?
Well, so you can challenge it. Facebook does go a bit. I mean, one of the challenges, of course, is that social media often gets repeated raps on the knuckles for allowing the sharing of misinformation, or for pages becoming so low on engagement and bordering on spamming. So sometimes pages that put way too many links on there to a specific site can often be penalized by Facebook as a result. Sharing a link or a URL in itself doesn't do that. And equally as well, Facebook does get it wrong, and you can challenge often their decision on that. Certain words are often looked at more closely by Facebook. Again, they're trying to protect themselves over misinformation, but again, they're trying to get it wrong. There is no reason the word sale or a URL on its own, although I can't say what that URL may be, should be blocked from Facebook. So if you can challenge Facebook on that one, or again, maybe look back, and again, I'm entirely guessing based on the page of the person who asked this question. So forgive me if I'm wrong here, but have a look back at quantity as well. If there's a huge amount of posts repeating the same URL, or there's a lot of posts that include the word sale, and there's a common thread of low engagement on those, that could be one of the causes.
Okay, that's great. I've got kind of a few how questions. So you did a fantastic answer on generally why people should be targeting, but is there an easy way for how they can do that in Facebook in terms of a process of where they go, what they should look at to see what should work for them?
Do you mean from, I'm sorry, I'm not sure how much I understand the question.
So we answered a question on, I think the question is, how do you target people on Facebook in terms of where you go in the menu?
So you can't target, so you target people on Facebook in an advert. You can't target people on a Facebook post through organic. There is a feature in the settings part that you can turn on, so a post could, a certain part of your existing audience could see a post. So if you've got thousands of people, I think it automatically happens above 5,000, but if you've got people following you and they're all across the UK and you only want people in Manchester to see a post, then there is a feature that you can turn on in the settings part that allows that to happen. But in terms of actually targeting new people to come to you, you can't choose who that is other than through the terminology you use in your content. Now, put yourself in the shoes of your audience, of your target audience, whoever that may be, whether they're 15 or 75. Put your shoes into their environment, into the person, try and understand as much as you can about them, and then engage with them as a result. So you can't say, right, this is my page and this is the age group I'm targeting for it, but you can base that on your own words and your own content and the way you describe your questions and your engagement around it. That's the best way of doing it. The other thing, of course, is that when you create a Facebook page, there's a section that says your story, which is where you can talk about why you do what you do. And part of that could also be used for describing who you do it for as well. So you can define more about who your target audience is in that feature too. But again, it won't only show your post to that audience, but it will just give some more indication as to who you're aiming it for. Because the other side of it is as well is that you're not just targeting those who fit into those, but you're, depending on what you're selling, you're also targeting people who know people like that. So for example, I'm not a mother of two. My wife is, but I might be the right target for a page for someone who's looking to buy a present for her or for our anniversary in 3 days' time, which I need to crack on with.
Yes, you do. So I highly recommend that, Ed, just for your happiness at home.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I jest. I have sorted it.
We've got a few minutes left, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to let Ed go through some of the goodies that he's got for you and how you can access them. And then we're going to go back to some of the other questions. And Ed's kindly agreed to stay with us for an extra 10 minutes so that we can get through as many of the other questions as we have. So, Ed, I'll let you go through those little bits first.
No, thank you very much. I mean, ultimately, we're here to provide you with as much tools and information as you need to help, and we can do that through a number of factors. One of which is our newsletter. So if you go to socialbee.co.uk and sign up to the newsletter, and we will update your inbox with the latest news and developments, especially during a time when Facebook stories are new, people's experiences of them are new, and the way that Facebook are rolling them out is new. So if you want to be kept abreast of that, then go to our website and sign up to our newsletters for that as well. We also have a series of blogs that are also specifically and support specifically aimed at small businesses too. So socialbee.co.uk/small-business is where you can go to access information. Products and services that we provide are across a broad spectrum of businesses and international businesses and businesses big and small. We provide services far and wide, but to specifically help you, then go to the socialbee.co.uk/small-business. We've got our podcast, we've got our courses, we've got our blog posts, we run webinars. So whatever you want to learn more about, and we have barely scratched the surface when it comes to providing you with more information to get you up and running, which I hope in itself has proved to be very useful. But if you go to our website for more information on that, then we can provide you with more in-depth webinars on that too. So loads of services available to you, and the link in the page to go for that as well. So yeah, webinars, podcasts, email newsletters, blog posts. We do the odd YouTube live video as well. So make sure that you have a look, and Alex and Amy are putting links in the chat box. So go there too to save you having to type in the URL. Just click on the link.
And just to add to that, next week's session with Amy, who's also in the chat helping out, is actually on how to use user-generated content to boost your brand. So sign up to that one at 11 next week. So I will
Don't miss it.
Yeah, definitely not. I'm going to go back to some of the questions because some of them we've got a few from shops, and so I'll start through those. First one is one actually around reposting content. So is it okay to repost the same content? And if yes, with what frequency?
So yes is the answer to that. Well, I mean, yes, if it's garnered. So there's two sides to this. If you post some content that you genuinely believe is going to create some buzz within your fan base, and it doesn't, now it could be a case of why didn't it? Maybe try it. It could be that you just caught Facebook on a bit of a quiet time. So try it on a different day a week. Equally as well, when you post content that does create a buzz, then you want to share it to an audience that may not have seen it the first time round. There isn't a definitive rule in terms of the level of frequency, but put yourself in the shoes of a consumer and think, well, if I keep seeing the same post and over again, then suddenly I'm going to get very tired of it very quickly. So my feeling would be, put a post out there. If it creates the buzz and you're thinking of resharing it, then try again. I maybe in a couple of weeks' time, and give yourself some. Don't make sure that there's some content within that separates those two posts. But maybe start with fortnightly. It doesn't mean do it every fortnight, by the way. That means try it again in a couple of weeks' time, and then don't forget I still share links of blogs that I've written years ago, but I change some of the wording around it as well. I make sure that that's evergreen, and again, I post it probably maybe every couple of months. So yeah, it's always good to share old content, especially content that's gone down well so far.
Okay, great. Just following on to that, there's a question from Val around posting frequency. Is there a better time of the day to post?
Yes, when your audience is online. The question is, it's not always clear to know when that might be. So there is, in Facebook Insights, there is the opportunity. It does tell you when your audience is most active online. But again, that's difficult to know. There was a time where we thought, well, if I'm targeting commuters, then maybe the best time to post would be about 7:30 and 9 in the morning. But given now that my commute is a 20-second walk across the landing and down the stairs, then it's often difficult to judge when that might be. Because you could also say that targeting single parents, then the hours of 7:30 and 9 in the morning is the worst time. So try and put yourself in the shoes of the audience and mix it up a bit. Let Insights tell you when your audience is most active. And given that people are often shopping when they're in bed or when they're on the sofa watching TV, then maybe do it at 9:30 at night. Try and do it on a Sunday afternoon and let your audience tell you when's most active. It's really hard. It's harder now than ever to know when the audience is online. So you kind of have to mix and match and work it out for yourself based on varying your posting times and seeing which gets the best interaction. I would probably avoid too much during the day. On a weekday, that tends to be where it's quieter. But again, your audience might disagree with me. So try it and see what they say.
And just on that note, because as you say, there's no right or wrong answer, and I feel like this might be the same, but how frequently should people be posting on Facebook?
So it's almost like you just need your audience on here. So again, let your audience decide. There is. You could Google this question and you'll end up with multiple answers, often contradicting each other. But equally, I don't want to put added pressure on you. My feeling is that when we focus on quantity of numbers, then we actually lose sight of what social media is all about. Every post should have a purpose. And remember that 80% is supposed to be audience centric and 20% about our own sales. So every post should have a purpose that fits in ideally into that 80%. And if that's the case in terms of posting being informative, educational, empowering, entertaining, then if you don't have one, then don't post for the sake of posting. Now, that could be 1 week. That happens about 5 times in a week. And it could be the following week, it only happens twice. When you've got that inspiration to post, and ideally try and plan it so you're not constantly fighting fires, then post when you've got that interaction. But try and keep some consistency. If we stretch it out too much, where we post 5 times in 1 week, we don't post for a month, then of course you're going to struggle there. So at least as a basis to keep it ticking over, once or twice a week as a minimum on that one. But ideally, if you've got stuff that people are going to love you sharing, then share it as frequently as you like. Your audience will soon tell you if they don't like it.
Okay, great. There's a bit of a question here on preferences. So Fiona asked this really early on in the session, but she says, we don't sell physical products. Is Facebook the best platform for them to engage, or should they look at Instagram or another platform?
So Facebook, I've never subscribed to the idea that everyone should have a Facebook page. It's an easy thing to shout out there when you realize it's the second largest social network in the world. But but that's not a reason to be on Facebook. Put yourself in the shoes of who your target audience is. Is your target, and for a start, focus on the 2 channels, 3 at absolute maximum, where your audience is most greatly represented, where they're hanging out the most. And if Facebook's one of them, then that's where you should be. And if they're not, then that's where you need to avoid being. Of course, if you're on Instagram and you need to create a business page from that, which you should, then you will need to have a Facebook business page to be able to link that to. So that'll be forced upon you on that sense. But ultimately, be where your audience is. And, it's often when we're involved in selling lifestyle products, then Facebook can be really powerful for you. I should just answer the question, caveat there, what's the largest? YouTube is the largest social network.
Okay, great. Actually, there was a quick question on YouTube. Have Facebook disabled the autoplay function from YouTube?
No, not that I've seen. I mean, I've shared a video on Sunday and incorporated YouTube in there. So if there's an issue that is again being taken away from people, then I'll have it coming. But I've been able to, I did it on a group that I run, so that was okay. So no, I don't believe it has, but it hasn't for me.
Okay, great.
Potentially, it could be in the personal settings, or it could be something that, again, Facebook are trialing with some, as they often do when they remove likes. They've tried that, so stick with it, or work with it. Maybe upload the video directly to Facebook.
Okay, and there's a question here about somebody's specific business, but I think your answer will be useful for everyone. Do you have any tips for making a very corporate or sales-minded business more personal on Facebook?
So humanizing a business is an art form in itself, and you need to humanize your brand. You need to create a personality about it, and some brands do this particularly well. You go to Innocent, who provide those kind of drinks. You have a look at their profile, and you can almost picture that the humanization of their brand is, or the human personification is like a teenager who's a bit frivolous. You don't mind your child hanging out with them, but you can imagine they're a bit of a teacher's nightmare. But they're quite friendly as a result. And if you can humanize your brand, give it some, understand as much as you can about the human personification of your brand, then that's the starting point. If you Google the terms or YouTube videos, brand tone of voice, and we also do brand tone of voice within our webinars and our courses as well, then that's a great indication as to how you can start to then understand how you can be seen by others. But they're creating humanizing your brand is an incredibly powerful thing to do when you can achieve it. So I do that piece as well. How would you describe your brand? What if your brand was to walk through that door now, then how old would they be? What car would they have parked outside? If indeed they had a car parked outside, where would they live? What would they do? You take two doctors in a surgery, just to sum up this point. You might have two doctors in your local surgery. They both graduated from med school at the same time, but they can be very different styles of people. One might be very matter of fact, get in, that's what's wrong with you, get out. And someone else might have a bit more tolerance and a bit more of a genteel bedside manner about them. But their information is the same. Their personality is different. Now, we need to understand what that personality of our business is, so that we can engage with our audience using the language that our human personification would use.
Okay, great. There's a general question here, actually. And again, it's somebody who asked this very early on. I think it was Rob. And he said he's got a database of about 5,000 people he's met in various events and things. Doesn't want to be seen to spam. Should he feel comfortable about uploading those addresses into Facebook?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, there's a GDPR aspect of storing those names and emails and using them in the way that they agreed to be used in the first place. So bear that in mind and make sure you're not flouting any GDPR rules in that process that could come back to potentially bite you. But ultimately, don't force feed it. Be interested in other people, allow patience to generate and to determine the speed at which you move, and focus on those who are on Facebook, who want to be there. And if you've got a LinkedIn profile, then make sure that you're sharing that you've got a Facebook page on there, or if you've got Twitter or Instagram, then make it known that you've got this page about you. If you're in email, if they're part of a newsletter, these 5,000 people are part of a newsletter already, great. Then announce in that newsletter that you now have a Facebook page. Do it that way around, but avoid uploading them directly into Facebook. If indeed, I'm sure that feature is even still available, which I'm not entirely sure it is. But GDPR kind of sets my alarm bells ringing to think that there's a better way of doing it.
Okay, great. We've got a few more questions, but everyone, if you could, I've just put a few polls live just for some feedback. If you could click onto the polls tab and just let us know what you think before you leave, that'd be great. But we've got a few more questions on here. So there's a question here around the difference between what's on Facebook at the moment and shops. And it says, if I can already tag a product and then allow customers to buy links to my website, how does Facebook shops differ? And do I need to switch?
So the idea and what Mark Zuckerberg announced is that actually the process can be in its entirety run through Facebook. So you can go through the whole buying process and manage shipping and delivery through Facebook shops, specifically for independent retailers. So that's one thing. And of course, if you don't have access to that at the moment, you won't be able to see that visual comparison. So does that negate the need for a website? I'm not convinced it does, and nothing indicates that that's the case. But what it does mean is that you could end up just offering your products and services to a different channel, as well as obviously to your website channel. The main difference will be then is that you can complete the whole e-commerce process through Facebook, and that's something that is quite unique and is certainly what has got everyone buzzing at the moment. But that's just not available for everyone yet.
Okay, great. And then just one question, which I think is a quick question, is how do people find those metrics on Facebook if they have a business page?
So at the very top, you have insights, and I can't remember exactly what the number. I think we need to have at least 25 people like your page. If you've got a brand new page, then it won't be there yet. But at the very top, where you've got your inbox and notifications, there will be a link that says insights. If you go into that, then you'll have all your insights data, and your menu on your left-hand side will allow you to work through the different parts of the insights data as well.
Okay, great. And I've seen this one come up in the chat, and we also have a question on it. And I think we've had this on the other sessions, but do you have any recommendations for scheduling tools? So
I would often schedule directly through Facebook. There is a Hootsuite and Buffer are the two main scheduling apps. I have a personal preference for Buffer. And I know a lot of people prefer Hootsuite, but you can schedule directly through Facebook. And ideally what you want to do is when you schedule that it allows you to embed the link into an image. So when you see an image on a post and you click on the image, it takes you to that link. That's what I mean by embedded. That's more effective than just seeing a static image and the link just appears in the post, which is what some scheduling apps do. So I would say schedule directly through Facebook. You can't do that with every social network out there, and I don't doubt you will over time. But because you've got that functionality, Facebook is going to work better with the internal scheduling app than with any third-party scheduling app. So do it through Facebook. And on scheduling, make scheduling part of a more in-the-moment strategy when it comes to social media, by the way. Scheduling's okay, of course, but be in the moment is more powerful.
Okay, and I'll do one last question. Angela, I know that you asked this earlier on in the session as well, but we'll pose this one to Ed. Is there any do's or don'ts for running competitions on your Facebook page?
So ultimately, make sure that we're not generating clickbait. There is quite simply advertising policies and competition policies. If you just Google the term Facebook competition policies, they'll tell you, and they can sometimes change. There used to be a competition that says share this and you'll get and everyone who shares this will get put into a hat. You also again have to abide by your own and make sure you have terms and conditions available to that. When Amy talks about user-generated content next week, there is also the ability to incorporate that within a competition element. You're getting people to share their images, their content, but as a result of doing that, they're tagging you in that, and also that could be used in terms of a competition as well. So that's something definitely to watch out for when Amy talks next week. So register for that if you haven't, but look at go to Facebook advertising policies in Google, look for Facebook competition policies, and whenever you run a competition, make sure you have your T's and C's clear so that you can be unchallenged, and also ultimately make sure that it's when you're creating a competition, that ideally it's a link within a page to your website, because that's where you're trying to direct people to go through. That's where I see the value of a competition being, if that's the target that you're setting for your social media strategy. So ultimately fall in line with that. But yeah, do's and don'ts, have a look for Facebook competition guidelines, just Google that term and then there'll be a guide in there.
That's great. And Ed, I'm going to sneak one more in because I did want to go for it. So it's around strategy. So should a Facebook strategy be the same as an Instagram strategy, or more engagement, more words or visuals? What would you say? I know it's a long, big question, but what are the key differences you should have in your strategy between Facebook and Instagram?
So in terms of strategy, no real differences at all. Ultimately, what your strategy is, it's an overall social media strategy. Now, social media isn't the panacea to the challenges that a business faces. But if you decide over the next 6 months, this is where I want the business to be, your strategy should be, this is where I see social media taking that strategy. This is where I see social media helping the business achieve its goals. Now, we might use different social medias and different channels. So, for example, a company might use Facebook or might use Instagram to use it as a bit of a behind the scenes, showcase who we are, a bit of an HR kind of supported tool, and Facebook might be more of a frontline products and services line tool. So it depends on what that goal is. It should be a separate strategy. They could be doing the same things. It could be that you're targeting one audience in one side in terms of their demographics and a different audience through Facebook in terms of their demographics. But ultimately, a social media strategy is what's important here, not a Facebook strategy or an Instagram strategy, but how is social media going to support your business goals? And then from that point, which channels are going to help us and how are they going to help us? And you might find that they're more entwined than you think. You might find they're more separated than you think, but only when you start those headline strategy workings will you then be able to kind of truly understand the question you've just asked. I felt like a politician that hasn't answered the question there. I hope I have.
No, you have. I think your answer is quite clear. It's like, don't think of Facebook and Instagram as competing. Think about what you want to get out of social media and then use your channels.
Okay,
So,
well,
yeah,
you said
I got
better.
it. Thank you so much.
I was just testing you.
You did. I was listening. Thank you, everyone. Ed, thank you so much for your time. I know we ran a little bit over, and I think we got through the majority of questions. Just before we let people know, you will get an email from us in a few minutes with links to replays and also links to the Social Bee resources as well. And thank you so much for joining us. And you'll also see a link in there to next week's session as well. But I hope you all have a fantastic day. Thank you very much, Ed. That was amazing.
No, thank you very much. And brilliant questions. Fascinating. I really loved answering them. So thank you.
You're welcome. Well, hopefully we'll see you next week. Bye.
Good for it. Bye.